Hey everyone, welcome to my recap video of GARS so far. This will be 1/3 into my GINTAMA ARC review series, meaning that's 22 episodes. So, it'll pretty much be everything I've talked about in the whole series so far, just compacted into maybe a few paragraphs for each arc, and then we're going to move on to the next arc, and then the next arc. But there will be some arc rating changes, because there are some things that I've changed my opinion on over the time of my watching of GINTAMA. So be ready for that. Obviously, the earlier arcs will have more changes. And besides that, this will be a great way for anyone who hasn't watched the series to catch up with it really quick, or just get a recap of my thoughts. So in any case, enjoy the video! Let's get into it. Now, to begin, we've got the first arc in GINTAMA, the Memory Loss arc. The anime's very first two-parter. With it being more than one episode, it officially qualifies for GARS. Thought I'd mention that because, yes, there are some manga arcs that are only 2 chapters, so that means they're only going to be 1 episode length, and that does not qualify as an arc, at least for the GINTAMA ARC review series. Memory Loss does a fantastic job at hooking most people on GINTAMA, but this is asking them to have watched 2.5 seasons worth of runtime to reach the hook. Especially important with GINTAMA's more rocky start than most. Granted, this hook manages to hit so hard because you'll already have gotten accustomed to who these people are and the bonds they share with each other. Anyway, Sorachi displayed his narrative prowess here to a great extent with an overall, out of the blue, very grim theme of reality. After Gin's memory is lost, the odd jobs disband, and a now memoryless Gin embarks on a journey of self-discovery after not feeling anything towards his past friend's attempts to jog his memory, all the while showing him how not so great of a person he is. Because of this, Gin sadly decided to leave them behind, since he realized they'd probably be better off without him. Even on top of Gin's memory loss, Banzai's dream was halted and his life ended by the government he swore revenge against 10 years ago. Eventually, though, Gin does regain his memory after realizing they're only this close because the horrible person they've learned to love is who this samurai truly is. Monster and all, he is accepted back with the duo in a very cute and touching moment. I hold my rating, 7 out of 10. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned in the intro, we're going to be ranking these as well, because surprisingly enough, I've never actually ranked them in a list from 1 to 22. So, I have it set up a little bit similar to Family Feud. I'll be revealing their positions as we reach them. So, Memory Loss is 16th place. Not too shabby for Sorachi's first arc. Next up is Umibozu. It seems like early Sorachi loved the idea of splitting the main crew up, but I can't complain. It's handled excellently yet again, with her father, the Umibozu, returning to Earth to take her back. This arc serves as a superb introduction to Kanko and is a great tease for the rest of her family. Fulfilling the hole that was some much-needed characterization and backstory for Kagura, we are allowed to witness how emotionally torn this girl is after being told she can't stay, with this being the very first instance of her Yato blood pulling her away from the group. Not only that, but it was great to see how much of a stranglehold the Yato's battle instincts have on themselves, and how difficult it can be to suppress them. Kanko never returned to Earth because of his fear that he'd end up murdering his own daughter. That's the kind of power this blood has. Now though, Kanko's back because he realized it's either him or the one she holds close to her new family. So to avoid any bloodshed between her new guardians, he decided to take her away. On top of that, all Kanko desired was to mend the broken paths between the two and re-enter her life as an actual father figure, but was doing so in a way that directly conflicted with her wishes. Shinpachi even had some great moments to shine here, especially when he disciplined Gin upon his heartless abandonment of Kagura. I love this moment as well because it puts on display Gintoki is just another human who isn't all-knowing like he may seem, and he also is just struggling just as hard to figure out what's the correct action to take. This arc's special to me because it's the very first of many GINTAMA arcs to make me cry, destroying me with that deeply cutting emotional send-off. Gin's reveal that he'd kept all of Kagura's letters to her father, his wishes that he had a family, Shin's tear-filled announcement that the Oddjobs are his family, and Kagura's declaration to change and fight against her Yato blood. Even when comparing it to future arcs, this arc still sticks out to me as an emotional masterpiece. Previously, I had this at a 7.5, but I think I'll bump it up to an 8.5. Meaning, it's only the second arc, but we're already in top 10 territory. And that's number 9. Alright, Infinite Strife time. GINTAMA's first arc where the main cast isn't directly related to the core story is great. Kanshishiro proved to be not only a hilarious comedic item, but also a thread to weave everything in this arc together. The story told with these new characters is that of loss and the corruption it can have on someone if not properly addressed, as we can witness in the now widower Kahe. To return his grandson to him, Kahe would hire a mercenary. The first real villain takes the stage in Nizo the Butcher. A blind yet intimidating taste of what the Kihei-tai are capable of. Actually, not only them, but also Gintoki, because this is the strongest enemy we've faced so far and he deals with it with relative ease. Something else highlighted in this arc is a Sorachi classic: forgiveness. Ofusa, Kanshishiro's mom, harbored no ill will towards her broken father-in-law, realizing what had happened and how he ended up in this downward spiral. She even still allowed him to see his grandson whenever he desired. ending the arc happily. Overall, a wonderful display of loss and forgiveness with some hilarious comedy to back it up. Only thing that really annoys me is that we never see Kanshishiro again. I mean, hell, even if you don't want to do the promised drink yet, we can just have some more Gintoki dad moments. It'll be staying at 8 out of 10, so that makes it 12th place. Just shy of the top 10. Next up, the mother arc. A small arc that introduces the mother to the crew, where it's revealed all three of them have actually, unfortunately, and very depressingly lost their mothers. So we get some rare Gintoki parent lore here and a quite sad reveal. The mom is a good representation of a typical mother, almost too good. She becomes really annoying really fast. And to top it all off, during the fight with the gutter rat gang at the very end, she farts in their face and is turned on by it. Okay. The gang is a huge plus though. Surprisingly, the best part of this little story was the antagonist, Katsuo, who works under Jirocho, which means this is the first time Jirocho is seen on screen as well. So we can say this arc acts as a teaser for the later Four Divas arc. Aside from that, it handles Katsuo and his group shockingly well, with an adorable moment where they're excited that their dachshund is giving birth. Also, that scene where the trio dress up as hosts and just like start throwing shit at Katsuo, that was hilarious. Holding my rating at 6 out of 10. Lowest arc so far, but not the lowest on the list. If you've seen the series, you know what's coming, but we're just gonna hold off for a surprise later. Anyway, let's go to Benizakura. The definition of an arc with a terrible comedic execution, but mostly fantastic points otherwise. I don't think there's a single joke to make me laugh in this arc, and trust me, it does attempt at a good few. They're just either weak punchlines or extremely gross, like with Takeuchi's creepy pedo catchphrase, or Kagura and Matsuko spitting phlegm at each other. It's easily the worst comedy we've seen up to this point, if we can even call it that. On initial review, I wasn't a fan of Nizo, but that's because it's been such a long time since viewing what Gin was forced to do in the war. I mean, now it's been even longer, but thanks to some of my commenters, I realized Nizo isn't all that flat like I initially assumed. Nizo stays by Takasugi's side because his ambition and determination to achieve his goal eternally showed him, the blind man, light. And he would do anything to keep that lit, even if it meant corrupting him to no end in the process. Also, I'm sure Nizo has a similar reason to Takasugi for following him in his dream, but we never really get that. I do really wish we got some more backstory for the Kiheitai and what led Takasugi to recruiting them. But anyway, something I always loved about this arc is Tetsuko, a swordsmith who was the sister to Tetsuya, the creator of Benizakura. That dude's a little annoying, having to scream every time he speaks. Also, this arc actually gave Shinpachi his first really metal moments, where he sliced Nizo's damn arm off. Just before that though, Nizo had inflicted, in Shin's words, a mortal wound, which begins Gintoki's list of ridiculous feats you have to question. Okay, how the hell did he survive that? But I will say, starting this series, I really was a stickler for stuff like that. Like, okay, how did he survive that? How did he survive that? But now it's just like, you know what? It's anime. He's got determination, and that's all he needs. Shin must believe that as well too, though, because weirdly enough, he doesn't take him to the hospital. He just brings him home. Here, though, we receive our first insert song in the show, Bangia Blues, which plays during a beautiful, soulful moment where Otai, who realizes the only one who can save the Earth from Nizo, is Gin, sadly having to push their samurai even further and forcing him to end someone's life once more. I do really appreciate Gin's expression later on in this scene, showcasing an indescribable amalgamation of negative emotions forming in Gintoki's mind because he has to kill someone yet again. Or perhaps this scene is acting as a reminder of what Gin had to do, something he must be trying to repress on a daily basis. Before we move on, let's return to talk about insert songs, since this arc has two of them. I have to say the final fight was insane as well, with Gintoki and Katsura going apeshit on those Harusame pirates to escape, with Shura playing in the background. Really cool fight. One of my absolute favorites, and a saddening reminder that Katsura never really does many more serious moments after this. I wish he appeared more in these arcs, man, even just for comedy. Overall, fantastic thematic depth, action, emotional beats, and some great uses of new and old characters returning, as well as some fantastic insert songs, but just a little bit of the arc was muddled by some smaller things pulling it down, like the comedy. Alright, and I'll be keeping that one also at 8 out of 10, so that'll be 11th place. Next up, the Tama arc. The Tama arc has Sorachi tackling yet another science fiction trope, but altering it in some great ways. In this story, we welcome Tama, my absolute favorite character introduced every arc thus far. I love her surprisingly sarcastic, yet still robotically literal personality, twisting the usual trope just right. Like Sorachi's other arcs, this one stemmed from something very human, an old man in the form of a scientist attempting to save his sickly daughter by transferring her soul into a robot, which ended up killing her in the process. This drove him to seek eternal life, to continue his his research, but that inevitably ended up corrupting his now artificial mind. It ends up brilliantly displaying how if you take a dream that is human in intention and transfer that into something artificial and robotic, that human compassion will be lost, leaving only the most computer-based logic and efficiency, soon changing that very dream into something horrific. While at the same time, with Tama's existence, it plants the seed that robots can be capable of experiencing emotions. Otherwise, comedy was good, nothing special, but still good. We got that Fennis Monja scene, which I always quote to this day, and some great antics with Gengai. Also, speaking of Gengai, he freaking carried this arc. Without them, the crew would be straight up dead. I think they would be freaking dead. Seems like around this point, Sorachi had it in his mind to create some of the most diabolically overpowered antagonists. 502 had an insane healing ability, which could regenerate any injury. Mostly, of course. Sorachi may have even made him too OP, since the only reason Gin was able to defeat him was because he'd monologued earlier, explaining how exactly to defeat him. I will say the Tama arc's ending has to be the most tear-jerking so far, with Tama/Fuyo's death. It made me ugly cry, for God's sake. I do really love this arc. It's 9 out of 10 on the scale, and that will place it at 7th place. Next up, it's the Yagyuu arc. Now, here is an absolute classic. Yagyuu gives us not only one of the funniest sequences in all of fiction, but also provides us with some fantastic representation for someone trying to figure out their own identity, and even tackles the subject of not needing to conform to any specific gender roles brilliantly. Not only that, but they also provide some of the best general banter between characters so far, and to top it off, some of the most difficult fights yet, all the while in a breath of fresh air, some relatively low stakes during the plate battle. Well, I mean, they're still high, but they're not. It's not like humanity is being threatened or anything. Back to the topic of comedy, the bathroom scene resulted in the highest comedic highs we've seen, undoubtedly, but there are certainly some stinkers too. It doesn't quite reach the level we saw in Benizakura, but there is one joke where Kondo pooped his pants and they spend like 3 minutes on it. It's not very good. But Kyubey as well as the rest of the Yagyuu clan are all super fun. Not to mention extremely strong, with the old man Binbokusai and Kyubey standing on even levels with the white Yaksha himself. Our main cast weren't forgotten though either. We even received a small surprise flashback to delve more into who Hijikata really is and his origins at Kondo's dojo. Also, we submerged even deeper into the relationship between Kyubey and Otai, giving some rare spotlight to Shinpachi's sister. Overall, a fantastic addition to Gintama, providing us with some of the most gut-busting comedy yet, insanely good swordplay, an array of enjoyable new characters, a deeper understanding of our already known characters, and a super fun canvas for all that to play out in the form of the plate battle. 9.5 out of 10. That's right, our highest ranked arc yet, at number 2. But that means there's still one more arc to go, which will surpass it, and we will see what that is later on. Next up, Hardboiled Detective. Now here's a particularly infamous arc. I'd wager this is the most skipped arc for most people on rewatches, but I can't really blame anyone who does. It takes the arc the first 6 minutes to reach anything actually relevant happening with the anime. Listen, I know it's probably better if you get all the shenanigans going on with a parody, but I'm someone who did not at all. So that's why I'm ranking this arc. Also, the manga version's probably way better since you don't have to go through that first 7 minutes, but that's not what I'm rating. I'm rating the anime. Most of the time I was straight-faced watching this arc, but I will admit that conveyor belt scene was peak, even if it raised more questions than answers. The actual backstory for Kozen Igata, as well as the main story with him and the foxes, was handled excellently though. The arc went from less than mediocre to almost tear-jerking in a quick minute. Eiji was fun too. Kozen Igata probably only still has his job because of her. To summarize, if you skip the first few minutes, it'll probably end up being more entertaining. Or if you're into the stuff it's parodying, then obviously it'll be more entertaining too. 6 out of 10. This one just barely reaches top 20 at 20th place, making it the 3rd lowest, I think. Alright, we've got Okita Mitsuba. Yeah. It's time to introduce Mitsuba and her fiance, who absolutely stinks. Toma Kuraba doesn't feel like a Gintama character at all, at least not from the arcs we've seen. He's a boring, mustache-twirling villain devoid of all humanity besides greed. Weirdly out of place for Sorachi's usual writing style of making the characters at least have some form of understanding, but I guess that's all you need when he's just a tool to propel the plot. And I will say the tool that is Kuraba works very well at doing just that. The plot, or story, in question was really good. I love how we finally get an explanation as to why Sogo harbors such animosity towards Hijikata. Also, there's some fun flashback chronologicality, with this flashback taking place directly after Yagyuu's. Unfortunately, this is where Toshiro's lover and Sogo's mother figure and sister passed away. In yet another more depressing than anything we've seen so far ending to the arc. Just look at this expression from Sogo. Oh god. A very, very sad introduction into the serious side of Hijikata and Sogo's weird relationship. A relationship we'll be definitely dissecting later on, but for now this arc receives an 8 out of 10, ranking it at 14th place. Hasegawa Prosecution. Taking a step back from Taizo's usual sorrow, we get to see him interacting with his wife, which causes them both to bubble up and actually work out a restart for their relationship, which had gone off the rails a while ago. Definitely an awesome switch up for the usual one-note Hasegawa. His luck didn't last long though, as he's soon put in jail for a complete accident, and enters into a complete downward spiral, bringing him the closest to taking his own life he's been yet. So much so that he calls his best friends Gintoki and all them total strangers. Thankfully, Gin gets him off his ass and helps him like the great friend he is, and even stood in as his lawyer in this corrupted court scene. Speaking of, that scene had me dying of laughter. And let me just say, this is one of the best moments for comedy Gintama's seen yet. Especially with the frickin' judge. You're guilty of causing your wife grief. Now go get her! You know, like that was a great moment. It is unfortunate we don't see Hatsu more often. Why did Sorachi choose to never show her full face? I will never know. I would love to see this couple interact more because every time, like I said, every time they're on screen, it's so heartwarming. And honestly, I just want a happy life for Armado. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I lowered this a bit because looking back, I wasn't too big of a fan of the Heidi parody, mostly because I'd never seen anything Heidi related, so it wasn't as entertaining as it could have been for me personally, and this is my video series. So that makes it the only other 9, which is just below the Tama arc, placing it at 8th place. Following that, it's the OwEe arc. A fun, lighthearted comedy arc playing into everyone's personalities pretty well. There's actually none of the bittersweetness Gintama's stories usually provide, and was just a through-and-through comedy story, but Sorachi still fell back on that gross-out humor in a pixelated Nobunaga puking game. Aside from that, all the jokes were decently funny, but nothing that blew me out of the water. 6.5 out of 10. 18th place. Next up, the Shinsengumi Crisis! The introduction of Ito Kamotaro, another Shinsengumi we'd never met yet. Also being introduced here is Toshi, Hijikata's other personality. I absolutely adored how Sorachi flipped what should on paper just be a funny little gag into genuine horror. If they couldn't get Toshi out of Hijikata, he was dead. His personality was dead. But yeah, he eventually obviously does become Hijikata again, in a heart-wrenching moment defining Kondo as the soul of the Shinsengumi, with Toshi allowing Hijikata back to his own body, which actually in turn starts up Toshi's separate redemption arc, or I don't know if you'd call it a redemption arc, but just his overall character arc in general. This scene and everything with Toshi is probably my favorite part of the arc. The arc portrays how much being an isolated, lonely, bullied, and parentally abused child can affect your adult personality, and make you all kinds of twisted. Ito decides to take over the country and prove himself because of this very fact. All his life, he's been stuck in this limbo of thinking he's not good enough, and that he's the reason his brother didn't get a good life. In reality, though, all the guy ever wanted was a friend. I adore how something so grandiose could and should have been addressed with something so simple. This arc had some okay comedy, but that didn't last long, because the scenes following are some of the most gruesome and death-filled we've seen so far. Ito's actions result in hundreds of dead Shinsengumi, but we know none of them. I always use this arc as a prime example on why this arc should have been done one way later, so you got to know more Shinsengumi and you got to know them better before they all died, and like give a lot of them some names, you know? Or 2, actually go through with the Yamazaki fake-out death. Because when you think about it, the entire Shinsengumi up to this point may as well just be Kondo, Hijikata, Sogo, and Yamazaki. I'd say that's probably not enough people for this kind of arc. The worst part is we get that funeral scene later on, but it was for Matsudaira's fucking dog, which was of course played for comedy. This one really did have the potential to be up there with the greats like the Shogun assassination, but they did fumble very hard. Something else stupid about this arc is that all the enemies unbelievably miss every single bullet when attempting to hit the main cast. It gets so bad at one point that Gintoki is just standing still while a Gatling gun fires a barrage of bullets near his feet, while he monologues for 10 plus seconds. It doesn't make any sense. Seems like the Kihei Tai can't catch a break either, because Banzai, who I was really excited to see in action, was defeated in a way that hardly made any sense. With the anime cutting around Banzai and Gin's fight, you have to wonder if some of the scenes were cut. Like when all of a sudden Gin's on top of the helicopter, or all of a sudden Gin had wrapped the strings of Banzai's, what do you call that thing? Whatever, his guitar around the helicopter and onto him. Like, it's just, how did that even happen? When did Gin get off the helicopter? It's just some of the things just don't make sense. And a lot of things similar to that, just confusing bits or very messy and slapdash feeling things, were scattered all throughout the arc. Overall, Shinsengumi Crisis had a very, very good setup and structure, but a disappointing execution. Though I will say Ito's death wasn't too bad. It was done very well, actually. I'll give this arc a 6 out of 10, which is weird. I definitely thought I'd be placing that higher upon my start of this series, but there it is at 19th place. Next up is the Guardian Dog arc. Now at this point, this was a definite top 2 arc for me, with some of the most mind-breaking and hard-hitting reveals yet, especially with Utsuzo's death. This arc excels at yanking on your heartstrings insanely well, resulting in some more bittersweetness, with a tear-jerking ending. A phenomenal arc where every episode connects wonderfully. Some of Sorachi's best and most creative writing yet. I don't have much else to say about this one, but it was incredibly solid, the jokes were great, and the emotional payoff at the end absolutely destroyed me. One of the best endings to an arc we've had so far. 9.5. This one manages to scratch out a top 5 placing at 5th place. Next up, the Ryugujo arc, which is the story of Urashima Taro, twisted in all the ways that make Gintama work. Every character was given a spotlight for comedy, and everyone's scenes were belly laugh hilarious. Like with the new Turtle Dude's Broken Scouter, Kagura being her regular self pretending to lay eggs, and Kyubei shyly following suit. And you know what, the list just goes on. Gintoki has actually turned senile in this one, so it allows for the side characters to play a more main, pivotal, and bodyguard type role. That's not to say Gintoki and Katsura, by the way, Katsura's back, hell yeah, don't help a shit ton in this arc. Them in their old forms are handled not only hilariously, but also are still themselves beneath the olden outside. On a serious note though, with another emotional as hell backstory in Otsuhime, her corruption and reformation, and some needed wise words from Gintoki, those being to live alongside your regrets with your soul on your sleeve, plays out perfectly. Thankfully, Otohime and surprisingly Urashima doesn't die, so Gin doesn't have to witness another death on his watch. A theme I'm starting to witness myself repeating. Really goes to show how much Gintoki desperately strives to become free of his war and tragedy-filled past. Finishing us up with that masterpiece of an ending scene, I score this as my second highest 9.5 yet. Not quite able to beat out Yagyuu just yet, but we will get there. Next up is Monkey Hunter, an overarching allegory for body dysphoria, which surprisingly digs super deep into that subject, with them being uncomfortable in their own skin, but being forced to deal with it and live a life devoid of the enjoyment they used to. Aside from that, the jokes in this one were funny enough to give me a laugh a good few times, but nothing outstanding. Plus, there were some contrivances that did annoy the gamer in me a little bit. Not much else to say on this one though, I'm lowering it a bit from 8 to 7.5, still ranking in at 15th place. Next up is the Correspondence arc. This one contains one of the greatest comedic bits thus far, in a scene with everyone joining in and goofily attempting to write a note back to Kirara, but admittedly had a slow and boring start on episode 1. Shinpachi gets the spotlight where he actually gets a cool and down-to-earth romantic interest, which stupidly never gets brought up again. They even tease this picture at the very end, which seems like they put a lot of thought into all their friends' designs and possible personalities, but the story is never addressed. In fact, we never hear from Kirara and Urara ever again, so it feels a little bit like wasted potential. But in the end, this is a lesson in self-appreciation. Kirara, throughout the arc, continuously puts herself down over and over again until she is eventually saved by Shinpachi at the very end, letting her know he wants to get to know her, not her sister, her. Of course, like I said, this goes nowhere, but it's still a very sweet end to the arc. Also, Sogo needs to be under a restraining order, because holy shit. I'd say that's another 8, so 13th place. Next up, the Kintaro arc. An arc where Sorachi and Sunrise continuously stretched how far and frequently they could switch between comedy and sadness. A great subversion of expectations to keep the viewer engaged, but it becomes overbearing near the end, where the main climax is interrupted with another rather lackluster comedy bit not worth our time, taking us out of what would be an otherwise tear-filled finale. Also, Gintama's DNA is shown with the gross-out humor yet again. These parasites are literally called planet pukers, and fill a planet with puke after the day is saved. I will say though, I haven't had to mention the gross out humor in a good while, so that's a huge plus. The comedy was sadly a bit lacking, but they did manage to mostly nail the emotional bite, with a super strong and unique intrigue between the two main new characters, harboring interesting and deceivingly benevolent outlooks on life. 6.5 out of 10. If it means anything, it's the strongest 6.5 so far, at 17th place. Next up, the Ghost Ryokan arc. A fantastic lore drop reveals that ghosts exist in Gintama and can actually appear for some people where the magnetism is stronger. It brings up some interesting things like question about the spirits, a big one being how they can eat and drink. Anyway, I always like this arc because it forces me to review my Japanese history to understand all the brief trio jokes. This arc presented us with ghosts, but what really stole the show is Gintoki's terrible yet lovable infectious singing. While not the most swordplay heavy final fight, Gintoki vs OwEe was certainly entertaining, holding up as one of the most fun battles so far. I loved all the little references like his second stand technique obviously being a parody of Gear Second, and the moment he started switching between personalities mid-fight, I fell in love. By the way, I freaking love Otai in Gin's body. Why does this character design go so damn hard? After everything was said and done, Sorachi had crafted another wonderful story where the villain is not a villain at all, but just another human who'd been corrupted by something. This time we can attribute her evil nature to an untreated chronic case of loss, loneliness, and grief. Also, another unfortunate time of Sorachi never using these characters again. I was so excited to see Rei later on, but never, ever again, at least I don't think. You know, just maybe as a love interest for Gintoki, or just another friend, because Rei has a really cool, really chill personality. Anyway, 9.5 out of 10, I think that one makes it in the top 5 at number 4, yeah. Next up, Yoshiwara in Flames, baby. Fellas, we've reached the peak. So far. YIF, oh fuck, wait, let's not call it, let's not use that acronym anymore. Not only introduces us to one of my favorite female characters to ever exist, but also a fantastic new setting in Yoshiwara. We received a metric ton of amazing cast members in this arc actually. Hosen, who is by far the most intimidating villain so far, and like the last arc, this villain turned into just another insanely corrupted dude who Hinoa, being the egalitarian she is, forgave him in his dying breaths, allowing him to be free of a lifelong burden of darkness. We were also introduced to Kamui, who plays a great foil to Kagura. Him and Hosen unveil the insane strength the Yato are capable of and reveal how absolutely terrifying they can be. Speaking of Kamui, his whole demeanor and outlook on life is a perfect example of what would happen to Kagura's mental if Gintoki wouldn't get involved in every arc to make sure she doesn't fight. This time though, he couldn't stop her. Shinpachi attempted to be that person for her in Gin's stead, but wasn't strong enough. Instead, the very thing the Umibozu was trying to prevent all those episodes ago was released upon this world, where she nearly murdered a man in a blind rage. This went from your everyday gag manga to holy shit, this is actually terrifying and something that's probably less than an episode's length. The insanely brutal fights, the array of side characters introduced, the overarching narrative and life lessons to be had throughout all blend together into a perfect mix. Everything in this arc is amazing. The comedy was superb and the story told throughout is second to none, at least so far. So, I'm sure you can guess, but this arc is 10 out of 10, a full score, leaving it obviously at number 1. Next up is the Shinsengumi Death Game arc. This arc helped me respect and appreciate not only Sogo and Ichigai's rivalry, but also their individual personalities as well, with them being the only two people here over the course of an entire arc. More so Sogo's though, because up to this point I was hit or miss with the sadist, and with what I like referring to as Sogo's arc at play here, they lifted my opinion greatly. I appreciated them delving into the depths of Sogo's personality as not only a character, but as a human with complex emotions, who is deep down just a troll who has a very difficult time ever showing his true colors. So much so that he has to create this elaborate death game just to manufacture a scenario where he can unleash his feelings without the burden of his usual facade to upkeep. A man who's scared of change. Brilliant piece of writing. 9.5, the only 9.5 out of the top 5, which this one gets number 6. Next up, oh god, this is the Barber arc. Here we go with another comedy-only arc, but this time it's executed insanely poorly. At least the second episode is. Remember all that gross-out humor I've been hating the entire way through? Well, they amp it up to 11 in this arc, and it's not pretty. If you get through this without gagging, I would be surprised. Like I said though, the first episode is fire. Love the crew's relationship with the Barber, who's a surprisingly interesting character with some great heartfelt dialogue. Again, I'm very sad that this character, the Barber guy, never comes back either. Kondo's first joke was hilarious, but once they started delving into the Shogun's bit, weirdly enough, because usually the Shogun has the best comedy moments, everything goes downhill and not in a funny way. There's puke, there's dog shit, and there's pubic hair. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it. Definitely the worst arc so far. 4 out of 10. By the way, that first episode, just the general, consistently good animation and voice acting carried. Next up, Otsu, which for some reason I assume was called the Otsu Quest arc, which the only other one with quest, the name is Tama Quest. I'm not sure how I messed that up. Anyway though, a perfect example of setup and payoff, an arc that just gets better and even better than that. Also, this one has some of Gintama's best examples of general characterization yet. A lot of characters like Shinpachi and Toshi are fully delved into more deeply, as well as dipping our toes into something more simple, but still some fun additions like Otsu's more likable personality shining. Since, you know, we usually only see her singing at her concerts, which are mainly just bad. This arc immediately usually puts people off in what seems like is going to be a repeat of the Barber arc's second episode, with the mentioning of consuming an idol's shit. It's hard to blame them, but that's the last of the cringe, thankfully. After that, the episodes literally just get funnier and funnier as they go on, especially with the brand new character in Taketsin, who is an absolute gem. Though I regret to inform you that he also never comes back, at least not majorly. Going into this rewatch, I assumed that a lot of the characters were actually people who would come back later on in the arcs. But yeah, it turns out there's a ton of forgotten members of Kabukicho. I really hope they get some time to shine in the Gintoki spin-off, the Ginpachi Sensei spin-off. That'd be so cool. Eventually, Hijikata has to dispel Toshi, who's reappeared in this arc, in what is one of the most well-animated scenes in Gintama during his fight with Shinpachi. Not to mention, the arc's message is more relevant than ever, showcasing how relieving and fulfilling it is to do something with all your effort, and not just existing uncaringly through life. You need to live and enjoy something, get lost in something, whatever it is, to your absolute fullest. Toshi's death is one of the best handled I've seen in recent times. His existence cannot be understated. With this arc completing the otaku story, we've got another 8 out of 10, this time being 10th place. And with that, we've actually completed the entirety of the Gintama arc review series up to this point. That'll be 22 arcs I'll have reviewed in hopefully less than 30 minutes. I think this video's gonna be less than that. But this entire series so far has taken me 3 whole years. Oh my god, I need to increase the pacing on this series so much. We're aiming for a finalization date of 2030. No, I need to avoid that the best I can because I don't want this to go that long. Like I said, I'll definitely try to upload these more consistently. I can't promise, but I will try. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to stay trash.